Hello, my friends. So I wanted to briefly touch on some of the recent developments that have been taking place in Syria over the course of the last week. Just a few days ago at the Aspen Security Forum, the Operations Command Chief Army General Raymond Thomas announced openly that the CIA would stop with its rebel funding program in Syria. Now, as we know, this is a program that commenced during the Obama administration, and essentially at the time the narrative was that the US was sending over financial support and funds to these so-called moderate rebels that were fighting against ISIS and sort of simultaneously taking care of Assad as well. Now, as we learned very quickly on, these globalist backed rebels were in fact nothing but ISIS and al-Nusra terrorists. So essentially we learned very quickly, through several leaks and through several sources in Syria, that these rebels and these so-called moderates were in fact ISIS and other terrorist factions such as al-Nusra, which were in no way combating ISIS, but were in fact perpetuating the problem. They were killing Syrian civilians, and their primary role was to topple, of course, the Assad government. Now, it's very interesting that this development took place, and that that Raymond Thomas sort of announced this publicly, because this is the first time that we actually heard publicly about this rebel support program and actually any mention of it essentially since Trump got elected. Now, the reason why I'm speaking about this today is because it seems to me that the US is slowly phasing its way out of Syria. Trump, of course, electioned on a non-interventionalist platform years ago. As we know, he advised that he thought that the intervention in Iraq wasn't a good idea, that the US obviously had nothing to gain from it. And that seems to be the route that the US is taking right now. And I believe that they are slowly retracting from Syria. Now, this is very interesting because we've got simultaneously several factions that are still involved in that area. The major players, of course, being the US, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the Kurds, and then obviously all of the shitty little terrorist factions as well. So there's a whole bunch of players in that region. Obviously, all of them have different political and geopolitical interests, and it seems to me that the US is slowly backing out. Now, Raymond Thomas also announced during that same meeting that the US was fighting a war on sovereign soil, and that the US essentially had no place being in Syria today, and that their presence in Syria didn't really correspond with the direction and the future direction in which they wanted to go to. So it seems to me like they are really phasing out, like they're trying to slowly leave Syria. I could be absolutely wrong. There could be other proxy conflicts that they have planned. Other interventions that they'll sort of use a laissez-faire policy and see how the conflict develops, and then perhaps use that as some kind of proxy conflict. I'm not too sure. We'll have to see. Nonetheless, it is a very interesting development. Now, during the course of this week, we've also seen several ceasefires in various cities all across Syria taking place. And once again, obviously, the Russians are still there, and Assad has publicly announced that he's in fact treating any US military personnel who are still in Syria at this time as foreign invaders. And frankly, I completely agree with this. There's no need for a Syrian intervention. There's absolutely no need to topple the sovereign Assad regime. The Syrian people were a very prosperous and economically successful people 20 years ago, before all of these conflicts began there, and all of these other conflicts generally in the Middle East as well. So it's a very interesting time. We're going to see what's going to happen. Obviously, the ISIS and terrorist conflicts are still very dominant across Syria. Russia seems to be doing a very good job handling the situation, but how things will play out between all these factions and whether or not the US will actually move out and then go back in, or sort of take a more laissez-faire proxy approach to all of this, is something that we have yet to see.